Of all the different cancers out there, skin cancer is the most common one. It's one of the easiest to prevent, and yet it is also one of the deadliest. There are over 5 million cases diagnosed each year here in the US. So, on this episode of Your Best Life, I have a leading expert who is going to teach us how to prevent and what to look for when it comes to skin cancer. Stay tuned. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Your Best Life. I'm Beth Schomp, your host and healthy living correspondent. And today I'm so excited because we have a very special guest with us. Her name is Jacqueline Boone-Morales, and Jackie is an integrative esthetician and a certified health coach. This coming May is known as Skin Cancer Awareness Month. And I thought how appropriate to get this wonderful, beautiful expert on here as our guest to teach us what to look for when it comes to skin cancer. So welcome, Jackie. So glad to have you on.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. So Jackie, do me a favor and just tell us a little bit about, your background and how did you end up into this field?
So in my early 20s, I had a passion for skin that started in a cosmetic department, and I decided to take that on to dermatology. So I started at a dermatology practice where I spent 25 years learning about the skin.
Okay, wow. That you have quite the history then, don't you?
A little bit.
When it comes to like melanoma, which is so life-threatening, what's the number one thing that we can do to protect ourselves from that?
The first thing that we could do is education. Arming ourselves with knowledge on knowing what to look for as far as the skin cancer goes is your first line of defense.
Okay. All right. So if I'm doing a self-exam, what does a melanoma look like? How would I know that that's melanoma?
So the American Academy for Dermatology has what they call the ABCDs of melanoma. And what those ABCDs stand for, A is for asymmetry or asymmetry. And it's not where a lesion that would develop on your body would look the same on both sides. B would stand for border, and border would be a lesion that is not perfectly rounded. It tends to have scalloped borders or is irregular in shape. The C would stand for color. So a color would be something that would be, it could be any color. It could be tan, black, red. It would be multicolored. D would be diameter. So we're looking for things that are larger than 6 millimeters in size, which would be about the size of a pencil eraser.
Right.
And E would be evolution. So we're looking at things that are evolving, that they're changing, that it might not look like all of the other lesions, but they're growing or changing in shape or color.
Sure. Okay. And I've seen that out there before. It's a smart way to present it so we can easily remember. But melanoma is not the only skin cancer out there. So
that's correct.
So let's talk about some of the other skin cancers and what can we do to reduce our risk of developing skin cancer?
So the two other primary skin cancers that are there are a basal cell carcinoma and a squamous cell carcinoma. They're not as aggressive as what a malignant melanoma is, but if they are left untreated for a long period of time, they could end up developing and actually penetrating deeper down into the skin, reaching bone. So it's very important to be able to identify these very early on, even to prevent disfigurement. And they do look different than a melanoma. These can look like a scab that develops. It could be kind of crusty. It could be areas that are bleeding and then they heal and then they bleed again. And these, even like a squamous cell carcinoma, can present with precancer lesions. So it's an actinic keratosis that may develop first, and left untreated, it will turn into an actual squamous cell carcinoma.
Right. So, I live down here in Florida and we moved down here in 2017. And one of the first things I did is I found dermatologist, and we go in every 6 months. We go in every 6 months for screening, not once a year, but we go in every 6 months. And this is a funny story, but I think it's relevant for the audience to hear. My husband, and I will say typical men, I don't need to go to the doctor kind of thing. And so he went. She found a couple of spots that she biopsied, which were fine. But it was a great visit. That was in January. Well, 3 weeks later, he noticed a lesion on his chest that was developing into a cone. It was a cone, and it was itty bitty tiny, but and first I said, you know what, well, let's try some essential oils. Maybe it's a kind of a skin tag. So we tried that, nothing worked. And then the following month, he had a physical with an internal medicine doctor, which again, you don't wait till you need a doctor. You make sure you have your doctors at hand. And he goes in, and I had told him, I said, I think that's squamous. And she goes, yep, that's cancer. And it was the first time that we really faced that. And it was very scary because we didn't know what we didn't know.
Right.
And so, but fortunately they went in, they did a little, I guess, mini surgery on it and got it all the markers were clean, our margins were clean, but it was our first experience with skin cancer. And
what that experience was, it's called a cutaneous horn, and it is a squamous cell carcinoma, but those are very fast growing. So it's not surprising that 3 weeks earlier, it looked perfectly normal. And now all of a sudden you've got this horn that's growing on the outer part of the skin.
Right. And of course, we're in the sun and we do wear sunscreen, or at least I do. And we'll talk more about sunscreen as well.
Okay.
And when talking about self-exam, like when I put my body lotion on, I have found places that I wouldn't have necessarily have seen, but I could feel, and they were new.
Absolutely.
And they were different. So when I go in for my screening, one of the questions the dermatologist will ask me is there anything different?
Right.
Even though she's going to do her exam with her little magnifying glass, I think it's important that these self-exams that we pay attention, because I'll say, you know what, I don't know if this is anything or not, but I felt something different. And she's like, you're absolutely right. And my first experience was in a facial. And the girl said, this area here on my upper lip, she said, you're really dry there. You're really dry. And it was that, how do you pronounce it? Actinic
keratosis.
Yes. And so they gave me some cream to take care of that, because if I didn't take care of it up front, then it was going to possibly develop into something more serious. So prevention is absolutely key. Absolutely.
100%.
So, of course, I'm fair skinned. And so it's pretty logical that I need to be aware of the sun and protect my skin. But surely Caucasians are not the only group that need to really pay attention to skin cancer, right?
That would be correct. So I actually worked for a dermatologist that was African American, and that was even after I had already worked in dermatology for about 20 years. And she was the one that educated me that even African American people can get squamous cell carcinomas, basal cell carcinomas, and malignant melanomas. Their skin doesn't necessarily protect them. If anything, the darker pigment in their skin can attract the sunlight. So they can be more at a higher risk of developing those types of skin cancers. However, it is rarer.
Wow. So let's talk about ways to reduce the risk. Let's talk about that. What can we do to reduce the risk of skin cancer?
So the one thing that we want to do is just try to stay out of the sun between the peak hours of 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. in the afternoon. If we're going to absolutely be out in the sun, we want to wear hats that have a large brim around that, so it's going to protect the sun from the face. Wearing sunglasses, because melanoma can develop behind the eyes as well. So that's another important key thing to do. And then we do want to use sun protection. So using either a physical block, which is a lot of what our dermatologists are recommending. As an integrative esthetician, I like to use more physical sunscreens because they're not chemicals that we're putting on the body that the body is taking in. We are actually using a physical block that is deflecting the sunlight from the skin. So things like your baby sunscreens that you can get in the drugstores, they're more of that titanium and zinc oxide that can protect your skin and have less exposure to chemicals. And that's what I personally prefer.
Right. That's what it is that I use too. I'm going to surprise you with this question, but let's talk about feet. Let's talk about feet.
Absolutely. Yeah. People think, well, the feet are not exposed to the sun, so why should I be checking my feet?
Right.
Not only can melanomas develop on the soles of your feet, they can actually develop in between the fingers and toes, and they can develop in the nails as well. And it can even develop in areas of our body that are not exposed to the sun. So the genitalia area, the buttocks area, these are all areas that we need to check, even though there's not direct sun exposure.
And that's a part that's really, I think, one of the biggest surprises for people. They just don't think that areas of our body that aren't exposed to the sun, we can still get skin cancer there. Now,
yes.
Of all these different skin cancers, what's the most common one?
The basal cell carcinoma is probably the most common form of skin cancer. I think a couple million of them are reported every year. And out of the basal cell and the squamous cell, basal cells develop 8 times out of 10 more than a squamous cell will.
Wow.
So they're very common.
Right. Okay, so let's talk tanning beds. So I know I've heard this so many times before. It's like, oh no, I have to go to the tanning bed because I need to get a baseline tan before I go out on vacation so I won't burn.
Yeah, we heard it too quite frequently in dermatology. Mm-hmm. I'm actually surprised. I was in dermatology prior to 2013 even. Mm-hmm. So the fact that tanning beds are still around, I'm a bit surprised. I would have figured that would have gone with time. But absolutely, tanning beds are not safe. It places you at a higher risk for developing skin cancer. And I can't tell you the number of patients I saw come through the door that were tanning bed users that ended up developing melanomas.
Oh, yeah.
So I would absolutely discourage use of the tanning beds.
I'm not surprised. Let's talk for a minute about the physical ways to protect our skin. I think in terms of sunscreen, but I know you're a big proponent, not just from the chemical side of it, but from the physical side of it. So let's talk a little bit about the options that we have in that area.
So one thing that we can do is just wearing protective clothing, long sleeve shirts that are kind of lightweight, long pants that will help to protect you from the sun. They do now make a clothing that actually has a protection factor in the fabric itself. That is more of a chemical protectant, but again, it can keep you protected up to 98% more than even just your sunscreen. Mm-hmm. So there are other options out there, and there are very fashionable options. So it doesn't have to be something that's unattractive. They're coming up some really good ideas on protective clothing.
I play tennis just about every day, and I'm down here in Southwest Florida, and I play year round. So it gets pretty hot out there. But I will tell you, I found I don't remember the brand, but it's a long sleeve tennis. It's a long sleeve shirt, and they come in all kinds of fun, beautiful patterns, but it's very, very lightweight. In fact, it's kind of vented here. It's probably not treated with the UV protection, but it's still coverage, so it's
nice. I love that.
It's better than nothing. And people will go, how can you handle that? It's like, it's so much lighter than you possibly think. In fact, I believe it's actually cooler because I don't have the sun beating down on me.
I would think that would be the case also. So I would really, and if you think about even back, when people were working on farms, people weren't really working on farms with their shirts off and exposed. They were keeping themselves very covered from the sun. Mm-hmm. So it's not unusual for people to wear protective clothing. We just don't think about it because most of the time we're at the beach and we're in a bathing suit.
That's true. Well, all the landscapers here, you never see a landscaper without long pants, long sleeves, a hat, and often even facial covering because they are protecting themselves from it.
Well, and you know what? That might be a very interesting perspective to take because when we think about African Americans and maybe even people that are Hispanic not developing a whole lot of skin cancers, they really don't want to get their skin darker, as Caucasians are really seeking to get a golden tan. They're not, so they're keeping themselves protected more, and that may be why their risk of skin cancer is lower than someone that may be a Caucasian.
Very, very true. Final question. What about the head and our scalp?
Okay, it's really a good question because I'm going to give you a story real quick. When I first started dermatology, which was many, many years ago, the very first person that I ever saw have a melanoma was a very young kid. He was redhead, and he developed he came in, he said him and his wife had been separated for many years, but before they separated, she found an area in his scalp. Years later, they got back together. She found this spot in his scalp. and he wanted to come in and have it checked out. It was a very large melanoma in the scalp area.
Wow.
And I, unfortunately, we don't know what the outcome came from that, but chances are he probably didn't survive that melanoma. People that are redheads really need to wear hats to keep themselves protected. Even as I've lost the pigment in my hair now, I have white hair. I'm very active in wearing hats because I just remember that kid, and I want to do everything that I can to protect the scalp area.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I wear a hat. I don't wear a visor when I play tennis. I wear a hat for two reasons. One is because I want to protect that scalp area.
Right.
But the other, and both of them have a brim, but my hat gives me a wider brim than my visor would. But the other thing is to protect my hair, my hair color, because I, have my hair colored, and just kind of keep it from that sun. If it's not going to hurt my skin, it's going to hurt my hair color. So I'm a big believer in hats. I just absolutely am. So Jackie, This has been so great, so wonderful. I'm sure there are going to be people that will want to reach out to you. They may have some additional questions. So what is the best way for someone to reach you if they want to connect with you?
So I do have a website, and my website is JackieMoralesIntegrativeAesthetics.com. I know it's a big, long web address, but if you want to learn more about some of the services that I offer, my own experience and things, I'd love for people just to reach out to me. There's an email address there that we could talk if you have questions. So
that's fantastic. Well, thank you again. And thanks so much for watching, everyone. If you will, do me a favor, like this video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't. And until next time, we look forward to seeing you here, and be happy and be healthy.
Be healthy. Thank you.